This week on the show, we're joined by Ryan Payton, International Manager for Kojima Productions from 2005 to 2008, narrative designer for Halo 4, and founder of the independent video game studio Camouflaj. Also, if you enjoy the show and want to help support it, make sure to check out our Patreon, where you can get episodes early, give topic suggestions, get merch discounts, and listen into our uncut recordings live. Speaking of merch, make sure to check out Series 1 of the Kojima Frequency gear, available now on Redbubble.
If you don't mind me asking, I mean, did you move back to Japan, or are you just kind of working over there? Or?
Yeah, for the moment, it's with the world in the current state of things, it's everything's a little bit up in the air. But yeah, I'm currently living in Japan at the moment.
Oh man, so you're kind of stuck there too if you got to travel or anything.
Technically, not entirely stuck, but it makes it a lot more difficult. They have a lot more. It's getting out is fairly easy, but coming back in, as I'm sure you've read, is a lot more difficult. So even for residents, you have to go through a 4-day hotel quarantine, which you're not allowed out of your room, and then there's a subsequent 10, 12-day, where they have where the Patriots are watching your every move, where they force you to install apps on your phone that track your GPS location, in which they call you at random times. You got to check in throughout the day, so you're not allowed to leave your home basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's so I am technically allowed to get out. They're not screwing around, and it's not fun when you come back. So it's quite the deterrent for international travel for anybody who's living here at the moment.
My wife and I have been planning a trip there. It's just been on our list for ages, and it's like, okay, well, look, they're finally dropping the lockdowns. We can start figuring this out, and they're locked down again.
And they're locked down again.
It's like,
it's
we're never gonna get there.
Anybody's guess when things will start to open up again. Anybody's guess, yeah.
But that's good. I mean, it's there. It seems like Japan has a really good handle on everything.
They do. I mean, they're so. It's all relative, obviously, but they'll get really nervous about having 100 COVID cases reported in a day, in which other countries would just love to have that problem.
Right.
And so it's interesting. I think I'm happy that I'm not a policymaker, because I think it's a really difficult challenge at the moment, which is you've got relatively low numbers, even when things are quote unquote bad over here. And you've also got a lot of industries that really depend on tourism and on travel. In fact, you probably know this, but Japan became over the last decade has become a really big tourism location across the world. I think maybe top 5 now, up there with Paris and other places.
Oh wow!
And so they've built up a lot of infrastructure. I mean, the Olympics was the crown jewel for that whole initiative, and then from that point on, it was going to be tourism was going to really help them turn around their economy, and then with COVID, it was just the saddest thing, just to see all this infrastructure built, all of these industries be built up and propped up for this, and it just hit at the worst time, and it's really sad to see. So there's a lot of pressure, obviously, to policymakers to open things up, right? But they're very reluctant to do so.
That's just really depressing, man.
Yeah. So we'll start on that note.
Yeah, right? This is the best, most cheerful topic we could have possibly started with.
Our other idea was to start with, dude, what's with you and the number 4? So I don't know if that's better.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was
very ominous, right?
Lunar Nights, which was Bokuro no Taio 4, and Metal Gear Solid 4, and then Halo 4.
Is that the last 4 that I got involved with?
I think it was.
We just need one more, and then we have 4.
That's a question for you.
You
got 3 more
really
Republics to make.
I really should not say this, but I might be working on another 4.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Now I got to think about it.
It depends on how you count.
I know what it is. I feel like I know what it is, and I don't want to. I'm not saying.
Yeah, don't.
I think I know what it is.
We're gonna get.
Yep.
We're gonna get.
Don't get in trouble. Don't get me in trouble. But yeah, what is up with me in the number 4? It's an interesting place to be, right? Because by the time a popular franchise gets to number 4, a lot of the kind of obvious things that the creators should be doing have been done in the first 3 games, and then 4, at least I find, is where it can be a little bit challenging. I've been playing a little bit of Halo Infinite recently, and I was thinking about how when we were working on Halo 4, all of the things that we wanted to do weren't entirely. They were all the things that were kind of like on the cutting room floor if you're going to do like a more standard Halo game. And I think if you play Halo 4, you can see that there wasn't anything revolutionary about it. It was more of a refinement of that franchise. And it's because it's really hard. It's like, oh, you want to have more vehicles? Oh, they did that in 3. Oh, you want to have bigger multiplayer? They did that in 3. Oh, you want to have like Forge where you can create your own maps? Oh, they did that in 3. There's just so many things that they were able to do in the first 3 iterations. And Metal Gear's a little bit different, obviously, though, right?
Yeah, in a weird way, Metal Gear sort of has a gene shared with Final Fantasy where they sort of reinvent themselves every time around.
Mm-hmm. Which is one of the things I really loved about it,
And that was the thing I was going to call out in response was, it sounds like you're basically describing the trilogy arc where, you have your first series, and I know you're looking at it from more of a gameplay perspective, but even from a narrative perspective, it's like, how do you approach the 4th title? And once again, Metal Gear is sort of an interesting situation in that case where, the 3 wasn't particularly a conclusion to the trilogy, and 4 sort of took on that mantle.
Mm-hmm. No, correct. And then it seemed like, okay, well, actually, no, Peace Walker is going to kind of be a missing link, and then 5 is going to be the true conclusion, right? So it's if anything, it was almost like a dual trilogy in which, like, the 6th game, if you count, Ground Zeroes and Phantom Pain as the 6th iteration. But it's one thing that I always just really appreciate about the franchise. And I remember giving some people a hard time about how, at a distance, and I don't mean anything to be like just disparaging towards this franchise. I really, really loved it. But at, from 15, 20 feet away, you couldn't tell if you're playing Gears of War 1, 2, or 3. You just couldn't. The UI, the art style, the characters, like a lot of it was really similar, right? I mean, there was advancements, obviously.
Yeah.
But with Metal Gear, you could tell in a half second, right, which game somebody was playing. And I always really admired that about the team and how willing they were to really deviate from the previous iteration.
I will say, on the subject of disparaging things, I have kind of given that game a lot of grief over the years.
Oh my
and
God.
You've been extremely patient.
You spent like all this past week being like, we're not going to talk about how I feel about Metal Gear Solid 4, guys. And like 10 minutes in, you're like, oh yeah.
Look, I just want to address the elephant in the room here because I've actually wanted to talk to you again for a very long time. In large part due to how embarrassing that interview I did with you was back in 2006, I think. If you even remember that,
right, 2006.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing the interview with you. I have pleasant and fond memories of it. It's maybe you don't. But.
Hey, we're not going to ask any like hardcore questions or anything.
Oh, shut up.
I saw it for the first time today and I love it. It's the best interview ever.
It's cool. Another question. I noticed that Vamp was nowhere to be seen. Will he be showing up in the next trailer?
Oh, you're asking some hardcore questions, everybody. And this is for Mr. Kojima. I don't want to get in trouble. Yeah, I should probably leave it to him.
Okay, moving on. What can you tell us about the recently announced Metal Gear film?
Hey, I'm Fingers.
Yo, it's Apache Smash.
Hey everyone, this is Days Ahead.
And I'm Nitroid. You're listening to the Kojima Frequency. I was this starstruck fanboy who very much elbowed his way in, and you were incredibly gracious and polite and patient, and I am asking these really embarrassing lore and plot questions. Just look back.
Well, good for you. I mean, there's nothing to be embarrassed about as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you're a fan of the franchise.
Thank you for putting up with that. I do really appreciate that. You made me feel very welcome, despite the fact that I technically wasn't invited.
This makes me think of all the times that I embarrassed myself, and like now I'm like, you know what? Looking at like Nitroid and Ryan right now, it wasn't that bad. This is probably worse in my memory than it actually is. Yeah, this feels like more of a lesson on cringing in your past than it is about Metal Gear at all.
Yeah, Ryan. We'll
that was just wild.
You might
for me
need to
at
get
the
some,
time, man. I'd never
maybe some
gone to an
professional
event
help
like that.
for this one. But yeah, I want to help you in the sense that, like, look, I probably should be embarrassed about interviews that I did back when I was doing more journalism, in which I would fanboy out about franchises that I was really into. And so but I'm not going to, because, like, what's the shame in it? Like, I just love games, and I love getting really hardcore about that. And if I have an opportunity to talk to somebody who works on the thing, are you kidding me? Of course I'm going to go and ask, like, all the burning questions. In fact, like, as a fan, I'd be pissed if somebody was interviewing a creator and they're not asking those hard questions. So good for you, man.
I appreciate that. That's right, though. You did. You worked for, I think, was it Xbox Nation and then 1UP? Was that it?
Yeah, I was part of the Ziff Davis conglomerate, if you will. But yeah, 1UP and EGM. I did stuff for Wired, Japan Times. Yeah, I kept myself very busy on the journalism front for a number of years.
Yeah, so you already knew how to handle all that by the time you got to me.
Well, I'd like to think so, but yeah, I think I thought there's an aspect of working on Metal Gear near the height of that franchise, working at Konami, in which it's hard not to get a chip on your shoulder, because you just have this constant reminders of how badass you are for working on that team. And so if I had a little bit of an air of arrogance, this probably in large part in that, because we had special key cards that nobody else at Konami had. We would have our special floor. People weren't allowed in the Metal Gear floor, where they can go to any other floor if they wanted to.
Floor.
That is badass, though.
Oh, it was, like I said, it was hard not to just start getting, like, a big chip on your shoulder.
I think a lot of fans at the time, I mean, we were all pretty young back then as it was, but yeah, we definitely had a chip on our shoulders too, in a large way. I think mainly because you sort of represent one of the earliest examples of a company sort of building a social media presence, where previously it was more, there was always this sort of disconnect between, you had the company and then you had, like, the fans, and there was really nothing in between. And then around the time that you came in was when companies started to sort of experiment with, all right, well, let's have someone here who can sort of be a liaison to the fans out there and sort of manage that side of communication that really hasn't been there before. Like, that's where, like, MySpace was starting to come in, later Facebook, Twitter, of course, but, like, there weren't a lot of examples of people in sort of the position you were in at that time.
I think you're right, and it's like, funny because, like,
I don't know. I mean, like, what were your thoughts sort of coming into that? I hope you weren't too annoyed with Metal Gear fans, because we can get a little heated.
Well, Metal Gear fans are special, and in all the good and bad ways, right? Just very passionate. They care, which is great. What was interesting, and I didn't know what I was getting into, was that you could look back and say, like, oh yeah, we started to have, like, a concerted effort to have a social media presence, but that really wasn't any kind of discussions we were having. It was just, hey, blogs are becoming more popular. Oh, there's these podcasts, and Hideo was obviously really interested in that, and that's where it all started. He would do his blog, and then he asked me to do an English version of the blog, and then the podcast, and he asked me to do an English version of his podcast, which I think lasted for like 1 or 2 episodes. And then it just became kind of silly. It was like, I'm just kind of repeating back to what he said on the Japanese side. And that's where it started to become kind of like my own thing. But again, it wasn't any part of like a larger initiative from the team. We just kind of fell into it. But before you knew it, by the time I left, I think it was around the time of Metal Gear Solid 4's launch, the podcast was getting 100,000 downloads every week.
Jeez. Which
is absurd. Yeah. So that was like a very small part of my job, though, too. It was something that I had just, I would literally do during nights and weekends. And then I had my full, 60, 70 hour work week in addition to that.
Right, because you were in more of like a producer role anyway. So this was like sort of, you were sort of incidentally ahead of the curve in regards to like social media presence.
Yeah, I mean, to give credit where credit's due, I think it was Hideo, and how he got into YouTube, and he's just he's really into that kind of stuff, and he's a lot more like public facing than a lot of other game creators, and so I just kind of, I don't want to say I followed his lead, I was kind of drug along with him, but it worked because I had a history working in radio, so I did enjoy it. I don't want to come across like I just did it unwillingly, but I didn't spend much time thinking about it at all. It was work I did. I wanted it to be good. I love that fans loved it. But I was all about making the game.
And now it's funny you think about it, like all these companies invest so much into their social media and building that relationship, whereas you kind of like grew it organically, even from the tech, going from radio to social media.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's funny how I didn't really want to get into it necessarily, but what it ended up doing was, more than any other reason, it landed me that absurd job I got as creative director on Halo, because I was so visible. People knew who I was because I was associated with such a big title. And going back to what you all were talking about just a little bit earlier about how maybe Metal Gear fans were a little bit arrogant at a certain point in time. Part of the reason for that is because Metal Gear Solid 4 was one of the most important video games of that time, and so because that game was so popular and there's so much buzz around it, and because I inadvertently became the face of it, at least to the West, it made it so when I left, I got all these emails from recruiters, and one of them was from Microsoft, and I ended up skipping probably 10 years worth of experience, going from more of a mid-level, sometimes high-level producer, and some little bit of direction here and there, to creative director of Halo 4, which was amazing at the time. I was so happy and excited, right? But then my lack of experience, I think, caught up with me as I got deeper into my experience there at Microsoft.
But you got your dream job regardless, and now you're kind of you're doing your own thing now. You've got your own company, your own games. You're basically running the show.
Well, now I have my dream job. Working on Metal Gear was amazing, and I'm so thankful for that experience. Same for Halo. I mean, I love both of those franchises. Metal Gear Solid 3 is still my favorite video game of all time, and I'm just so thankful for the experience. It's the best, man. It's the best. But I think I've realized that I'm happiest when I'm afforded the ability to make a lot of mistakes and learn, in my own kind of safe area, and not have to, worry about higher ups who are constantly disappointed with me. I get to work with my peers who are constantly disappointed with me as we continue to grow. But it's been an amazing experience. We just hit 10 years of Camouflaj's existence just recently. And it's been so fun to, thank you. And it's been so fun to look back at wow, I had no idea what we were doing when we started. I have a little bit better of idea of what we're doing right now. I'm so excited about what we're building. We've got about 80, 85 people now. We're building a really, really big game. And things are just going really great. So this is right now I'm living my dream job.
That's such a huge accomplishment too, because from everything I've heard from people who have started game development studios, it's much like starting a restaurant where the first couple years can make or break you, but once you start getting over that hump, you can sustain it. In 10 years, that's a huge milestone.
Yeah, I never thought we would get to 10 years. There was at least 9 times in which I remember thinking, I don't know if we're going to be around next week. Over the last 10 years. But now we don't have that anymore. We've got money in the bank, got a solid team, good project. It wasn't until maybe a year and a half ago or so, 2 years ago, maybe, that I didn't have that constant fear of having to shut the doors. And that's 8 years of that, man. That's not fun.
Just grueling work, basically.
It is. It's just, you're just always on the razor's edge. You're always worried about hitting payroll. And a big reason for that is because Republic, which just wasn't the hit that it needed it to be. We still have not made the money back that we spent on that game. But through a lot of hard work and just tenacity and grit and luck, and we were able to kind of crawl our way out of that and have a second shot, which was the Marvel's Iron Man VR title that we shipped last year. and now we've got a new title that is even got bigger scale and greater ambition. So yeah, we're like I said, we're very lucky to be where we're at right now.
I wanted to ask you, actually. I know I said that wasn't going to be an interview, but I'm realizing as I'm talking to you and hearing this, I'm like, oh my god, I've got so many questions. So I just
go for it. I mean, especially if it's related to Metal Gear Solid 4 and your disdain for it.
Oh god.
Everybody's calling out Nitroid.
Strangely, that is you know what? I will ask you something about that in a minute when I figure out how to formulate that question better.
Sure.
Because what I wanted to ask you about was Kowloon Knights and everything going on there. And because I've seen a lot of these indie game platforms spring up where they're trying to find new creators and new ideas and get them off the ground. But I don't know much about it. And I saw that you're one of the advisors on that, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I'll give you the high level, and if you have any follow-up questions, more than happy to answer them. So I guess to start off, I'm less involved with Kowloon Knights and also a related fund called Makers Fund. I'm less involved these days than I was in the past, and as part of an effort for me because I now have the ability to focus on the single title that we have right now at Camouflaj. Like I feel like that's the best use of my time, despite the fact that I really love the work that I was doing on Kowloon Knights and at Makers Fund. So basically what these things are is these are two funds. Makers Fund is an equity-based fund in which the fund raises money through large companies and individuals who have money that they want to invest in this fund. And then that money is then distributed via people like myself as part of like the leaders of the fund towards mainly video game related companies that we feel like have like a bright future. They need some money to kind of get their company up and running or get their tech up and running. And so dozens and dozens and dozens of companies have received funding from Makers Fund. But that's like the company is like, we're in exchange for shares of the company, we're putting money into those companies to help them grow. On Kowloon Knights, it's a little bit different. It's more project based. So that I think there's, I don't know how many now. It's maybe 50 games now I've received funding. So it's project focused. We put money into a game, and that includes games like Godfall, which was a launch title for PlayStation 5. It includes Scorn, which is coming out next October through I think it's launching initially on PC and Xbox, and Sifu, which is coming out I think in January, February, which is a really big anticipated title for PlayStation 5. And so many other games. And so, yeah, it was really fun working with Alexi and Samuel and Lindsay and that whole group over there, because what we would do, and they're doing this still, but I backed away from it just because of time commitments. But every week we would review 5 to 6 games that were coming through, indie titles and larger titles. And then we would just decide as a group whether or not we believe that we should be putting money towards their budget to help them get to the finish line. And so I was just playing so much stuff over the weekend and learning and interacting with so many different teams. It was really, really fun. But at the end of the day, I just was running out of time, and I was doing so many other things that I decided to ramp that down and again to focus on the title, the big title that we have right now at Camouflaj.
I gotcha. I guess my big question then was, how is something like Kowloon Knights distinct from a publisher?
Yeah, so because they don't publish the game, so basically once we, like for example, we'll go to a company like Ebb Software, which is based in Serbia, and I actually went and visited the team there, and they're making like this game called Scorn, as I mentioned. It's an HR Giger type of inspired horror first-person game. It's terrifying, it's beautiful, it's amazing what this team is doing, and so we would meet with them, we would check the build. We would help them. We would give them money for their milestones, and we fund. Kowloon is behind a lot of the funding of that title, but that's the extent of it. Then the team has the independence. They have the freedom to then go take that game. They can go publish it themselves if they want, or they can go to Microsoft and see if Microsoft wants to publish the game, or Private Division, or Take-Two, or EA, or whoever they want to go to. They can go get a traditional publisher. But Kowloon Knights is really only on the hook to provide money. They're not providing marketing or distribution or PR support for the games. I
understand. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay. Then I guess like last question to sort of lead back into what you're doing, and we'll get to MGS4.
Mm-hmm.
Is just you personally, not just in regards to Kowloon Knights, but as someone who now runs their own video game studio. what is it that stands out to you in terms of like a unique idea or a creative game, something that makes you go, okay, this is something I want to chase down?
In terms of like where we want to take our company and what we're getting inspired by.
Well, yeah, I mean, I assume it's different contexts, but with Kowloon Knights, you would be looking at these projects that other people make, but as someone, as the owner of a game company, I would imagine that if it's not a contract job where you're working with an existing IP or something along those lines, you've got to come up with ideas of your own to pursue.
Right.
Like Camouflaj was your original idea. So like, what is it that makes you? How do you know that moment when you're like, okay, this is the one. This is what we're going to go for?
Well, I'm going to flip it around because I used to have that ability back on Republic because it was a small title. I was funding it by myself. It was my liquidated 401k from Microsoft, which
my God.
I was hit with a 50% tax penalty. It was my life savings. It was money from my parents. And it was eventually the Kickstarter money. But there was nobody telling me what we could and could not make, right? So that was a game that I really wanted to make. And it was started off as basically a more of a narrative-driven game that was inspired by what would happen if we made a game that was basically like you're doing FaceTime with our hero, Hope. And it was more choose your own adventure. It was more narrative-driven, but not kind of isometric, no stealth action. And that only came in later throughout the development through feedback that we received from Bungie, of all places, about pushing us more towards making it like almost like a Metal Gear inspired title, which is funny and how that all kind of worked out. But to answer your question though, like that was that was a story I wanted to tell. It had too many ideas in there, lots of creative activity going on there with me and the team. But from that point on, because again that game wasn't a commercial success, the value that Camouflaj can bring to a publisher, for example, is that we can create a game for them, like Marvel's Iron Man VR, but it wasn't necessarily like, hey, I woke up one morning and said, hey, Sony, Marvel, let's do this thing together because I've got this great idea. It was more of an opportunity that they brought to us. And same with our current title. It's some outside forces like saw what Camouflaj was doing. They played Iron Man. They said, hey, you guys are really, really good at this stuff. How about you do this game with us and we'll fund it? And that's kind of where we're at as well. So that's not to say that we don't have creative input. And I have plenty of ideas and plenty of things that we're doing that's really unique to this title. But it's not something from the ground up that I pitched and proposed necessarily.
Is it also something where as you're working on this new project, you can have other things that you're experimenting with sort of in parallel as well? Or is it like we've got to have all hands all on this one project?
There's always that pull of wanting to kind of dink around with something else. I have plenty of game ideas that I want to execute on at a certain point, but the more I learn about the absolute greats in the game industry and outside of it in other industries as well, it's one thing I think that many of them have, not everybody, but many of them share, is that ability to focus. And that's why I'm not doing work with Kowloon anymore. That's why I'm not doing multiple games at the same time. I'm just really trying to focus in on this one game and put all of my creative energy into it to make it the best thing possible. Because at the end of the day, like that's ultimately what I want to do, and that's what my peers at Camouflaj want to do. Is we want to make the best games possible. So the more we like distract ourselves or spread ourselves thin, the less likely we're going to be able to execute on something really terrific.
Right. There was I guess that's kind of a change from Kojima Productions, where you were sort of wearing a lot of hats and you had your hands. I remember you telling me ages ago that Lunar Nights was sort of the first game you got to add creative input to. But you were sort of all over the place because there were. God, I'm trying to remember what was all coming out at that exact same time. But there was Lunar Nights.
Ridiculous.
There was Portable Ops, there was Metal Gear Solid 4. I think there was even a fourth one. It might have been like Bondesine or something like that. I can't even remember now.
Yeah, at one point, I don't think they all overlapped, but within like a year, I think I was working and being fairly involved with Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence.
Oh, that's right.
Metal Gear Acid 2. Yes, Lunar Nights, the digital graphic novel for Metal Gear Solid 1, and then eventually 2. And then there was all this other stuff they were doing in addition to that were not necessarily game related, but other initiatives like Metal Gear Saga, and there was a 20th anniversary celebration, and all this other stuff we were doing. And I'm probably forgetting other things, but yeah. Then eventually there's Portable Ops, and there's Portable Ops Plus. There was so much activity going on, and yeah, I was getting pulled into all those things. Absolutely.
It's so ironic that they like pulled you and they're like, we need to do 20th anniversary stuff. They didn't tweet about the 20th anniversary for the NA release of MGS2, and I'm still feeling it.
It is kind of hard to think
it's weird
about
over there,
how
obviously. Yeah, it is. It's strange.
Yeah, it seems like there's something going on there. Maybe they're trying to just find their footing after how big of a shakeup that was, but it's hard to tell without really being inside of that. It's easy to sort of
really knows.
Yeah, and I guess this sort of leads into my MGS4 question, because it's very easy to look at something like a game development company or the production cycle of a game from the outside and make criticisms and be like, well, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they think of this? But it's so much more complicated and labyrinthian to actually make a game than how it seems on the outside. Like, we talk a lot about how game, people who are fans of games often romanticize game development. And if you haven't had the experience of working in game development or even software development, it can probably seem a lot more simple than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So
is that's your setup for something related to what you don't like about MGS4?
Well, I mean, I could go. I'm trying to be really nice about this. No, it's okay. I kind of knew this was coming.
It's so easy, right?
It is so easy.
Yeah, they've been laughing about this for a while. So,
so Ryan, why don't we just do this? Why don't you just tell me every single thing you don't like about that game, and let's just air it out? Because
Ryan,
what other opportunity we're gonna have?
We do have a whole episode dedicated to it. But
Ryan versus Ryan.
I've got it.
At this point, it is.
It's what the fans want.
I've got it. Ryan,
I will say this:
2 Ryans enter,
1 Ryan leaves.
Why isn't MGS4 the best? Why isn't MGS4 your favorite?
So, I will say this: there was a time when I was very, very. I don't want to use the word angry, but I was very much against that game. And it just sort of had to do with the expectations that I had versus what I later found out I liked about the series. And it's something where as an adult, I really enjoy fiction that doesn't give you all the answers. I really like stories that necessarily don't have clean-cut conclusions where every single little thread is tied in a perfect knot. And in a lot of ways, when I sort of finished MGS4 and was like, okay, why didn't I like that? I had to start asking myself, like, why didn't I like that? It was where I sort of started to really figure out what my tastes were. And what kind of things I appreciated in fiction and media. But now it's sort of a thing where me disliking MGS4 has turned into a kind of a bit,
Right.
So there's an element of like keeping up appearances there where, like, say the thing, Bart, right?
Yes.
But, it is interesting to look at because, you have people now who look at Metal Gear Solid 2 and I mean, God, everybody's been writing about it recently. It feels like how it predicted this and that, and it saw, everything about our current world coming to pass this far, this long ago. Everybody thinks it's brilliant today, but when the game came out, that wasn't the case. It was reviewed well, and it sold very well. But on the ground floor, a lot of people were very put off by that game, whether it was because of Raiden or because of how convoluted they felt the story was or how preachy they thought the ending was. This attitude of MGS2 is brilliant is very recent. And so it's just kind of a thing now where, God, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Is that no? I can help you with there. So that you are predicting that Metal Gear Solid 4 is going to have a similar renaissance?
I've
when
wondered.
People realize that Because
Well, let
you
me
know the
ask you
game
this.
there's a lot of parallels with 2, right? Because it reviewed very well, sold very well, and then there was a backlash, right? And then over time, I think people start to appreciate it a little more, and that's at least what I'm observing.
Yeah, and I have noticed that. It's a thing where Metal Gear Solid 4 felt sort of like an antithesis to Metal Gear Solid 2, where it sort of looked at that game and said, all right, well, you don't like not having answers. You don't like playing as Snake again. Well, we're going to give you exactly what you want.
Right.
And there was this sort of it felt, and you can tell me as somebody who worked on the game, you know, everyone's had an interpretation about what that game meant, what was the idea behind it. And you know, obviously at the end of the day, you're not necessarily trying to make this postmodern piece of artwork. You're trying to make an interesting game with an interesting story that people are going to enjoy. But that
Correct.
layer still seems like it's there, and it's very unique to Metal Gear. And it on many levels sort of seemed like MGS4 was saying, hey, Metal Gear has kind of run its course, and in a lot of ways, it's this walking corpse, and it's sort of out of its own time, sort of like Old Snake was. But we've got a responsibility to sort of close this out, so we're going to follow through with that. Like that sort of seems what it was going for. Is that sort of what it was going for? Or like, are all these interpretations that people have had sort of like kind of off the wall and just not at all applicable?
I'm going to try my best to answer that. It's a really difficult question.
Yeah, I know I kind of went
no,
all over the place there. So
no, because it's because the game. It's not. There's nothing wrong with the question. It's that the game in and of itself is a lot of things, and I think that's one of its weaknesses is that it wasn't driven by a single pillar or 4 pillars or 5 pillars. It had like 10 things going on, 10 big things going on. Hideo was feeling, and I think quite genuinely, that he didn't want to work on any more Metal Gear games and he wanted to close it out. Like you said, he wanted to tie up a lot of the loose ends. It was a really important title for Konami and arguably even more important for Sony and for PlayStation. And so it needed to be like this big system seller and this massive showcase for the PlayStation 3. It was a game where the team, I think, was at their height in terms of talent. And so he could push for lots of different things like, hey, we're going to have a full FPS mode. I mean, it was ridiculous, like the amount of like scope that went into that game. It was that plus then the political angles of it, all the different kind of globe-trotting aspects of it, which was brand new for the franchise as well. You know, typically the games were set in like one location, right? But we wanted to do this kind of James Bond, hey, kind of crossing the globe with all these different biomes, which was a big challenge for the team, and that was something that they wanted to do. Plus embedded podcasts and all this other ancillary stuff. There's just so much going on and it was such a massive project that it's really hard to pinpoint like what was that really game all about, other than it kind of is all about so many different things, ironically.
I think I know how to sum up my question way more succinctly. So just to sort of get to the heart of what it is I've been wondering for a long time, was any part of that game, story, mechanical or otherwise, made cynically?
Do you have any specific examples? Because there might be.
Let me try and think of one off the top of my head. It's such a nuanced subject, and usually I'm really quick on the draw with this stuff.
While you're thinking, can I think of one? Like,
yeah,
I have one in my head, but I don't know. Nitroid, please correct me if you think this is like a bad.
You got the guy who worked on it here, and you're asking me to correct you.
No. I'm not, like, I want to make sure I'm getting your point across because this is very important to you, okay? But
Okay,
I think one example I'm thinking of is almost sort of the torture Raiden went through to become the cyborg ninja he is. From a narrative perspective, it's a bit cynical in that, okay, in MGS2, we left Raiden to, be his own person after, and try to understand the events that he's experienced in MGS2. Then we get to 4, and it's like, oh, well, you guys didn't think he's cool, so as fate would have it, we're going to make him cool, but at what cost?
Nitroid said, he's like, yeah, I'll become Gray Fox instead. Like,
right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth
that's
to
a good
that.
example.
Absolutely, that's a great example. And yeah, I mean, that was. I remember the morning that I saw the concept art for Raiden for Metal Gear Solid 4. It was a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and Hideo wasn't always in the office on the weekends, but he was there that weekend, and Shinkawa was there that weekend. And Hideo pulled me into his office, like, hey, you want to see what Raiden looks like in 4? I was like, sure. And he's like, we're going to make him really cool, and we're going to put him through hell. And I said, that's awesome. Like, yeah, now I'm all excited about having Raiden in the story. And he's like, good, because that's what we want. Yeah, so that was definitely part of the intent behind there. So yeah, and I think it's fair to say that maybe it's cynical or kind of poking at the player, which Hideo has a history of doing, and he has fun with that. But there's also, as you know, there's a lot of sentimental bits of the game, like the Sunny character and so many other things. I think Otacon's arc is another example of that. Johnny's arc is another example of that. So yeah, there's definitely it's just, I mean, back to my main point. There's just so much going on in that game.
Yeah.
Completely unrelated. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
I was just going to say completely unrelated note, but one of my girlfriends there's a part in Endwalker, Final Fantasy 14 Endwalker, that looks like some shit out of Metal Gear Solid 4. And anybody who's it's like the first solo duty. Anyways, I tweeted that. One of my girlfriends was like, yeah, this game is a lot like MGS4 in certain ways. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Yeah.
Interesting. I wish I was playing. I wish I had time. It's if I had time, that would be what I'd be playing right now.
Well, I mean, it seems like they don't want more people on their servers, so
no, exactly. What an incredible! That's a whole other subject, but what an incredible game! What an incredible turnaround for that franchise!
Right?
What an incredible comeback!
The comeback story of the decade, right there.
It's insane. It's amazing.
Can anyone think of another example where a company had to say, you're not allowed to play our game because there's too many people playing it? Like, literally with putting out a piece of like news that says we are not selling this game anymore. Like, it's unheard of.
Not off the top of my head. That's a great question.
I can't think of it.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's such an evangelical aspect to the fan base that just turned on its head. Not that they're like not nice in this situation, but it turned on its head like, we're full, everybody go home.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met a mean 14
We
player.
also have Final Fantasy 11 over here, just in case.
Yeah, they did a promotion for 11. But now that
amazing.
Guys, give our servers a break.
Okay, so let's go back to why Ryan hates Metal Gear Solid 4.
I did ask for this. It's the thing I'm realizing now, as I think about it more and as I consider some of the things I've said, I'm wondering if maybe I romanticize Metal Gear a little too much. It's as somebody who looks at it from the outside and tries to figure out, okay, I'm gonna look at the story and I'm gonna try to dissect the intent behind this. That maybe I'm thinking too hard about it. I mean, I know that Mr. Kojima spends a lot of time writing his stories. He's said before that, like, when it comes to the primary narrative, he'll sit down, he'll write the whole thing out himself, and then obviously, other people come in and do supplemental writing. But I mean, these sort of meta-narrative aspects, I mean, how at the forefront of the process of making these games is that?
Such as like the high-level arc of the characters of the major themes. Is that what you're?
Yeah, sort of. And I mean, MGS4 sort of, you could say, is about Metal Gear itself as a franchise, for example. Like, would that be fair?
It is, and it's also, like I said, though, it was even at the beginning, it was about so many things. It was about what was going on in the world. It was about the Iraq War. It was about the private military companies. It was about, like, he has never told me this directly, so this is just speculation. But I think a lot of it was about himself. He's tired. He's tired of working on Metal Gear. I think there's a lot of kind of autobiographical elements of what he does with the Snake character. And so, like, I think I remember seeing early drafts of like the beats of the story, and the way he works is he'll work in really broad strokes, but he also work in extremely detailed things. one thing I think I can reveal that's not that big of a deal is that one of the earlier trailers we had, it had all this kind of high level direction, but it also had very specific things, such as the temperature in the Middle East on this day that we're setting, the scene in, is the same temperature that Tokyo Game Show last year was on this day.
Oh my gosh.
And he likes to infuse those kinds of bits of what the team experienced, what he experienced, and kind of infuse that into the game. So yeah, you can get really granular and you can get really very high level. But there was, like I said, though, so much going on. It's like, I want to close out this game. I want it to be a fair final send off for the fans. I want to poke at the fans a little bit and do all these other things. So look, I think at the end of the day, I think if I understand. I can understand why you don't like the game, because I think the game has it wears a lot of its weaknesses are fairly visible. It's lacking in the gameplay side of things. It's very top heavy when it comes to cinematics versus gameplay, right? You want a lot more gameplay. You want deeper mechanics, deeper systems, more ability, and more opportunities to play the game, right? There's really obvious attempts at closing out narrative threads that are really difficult to close out, and I think the team did the best job, but some of them are good and some of them are not so good. And then I look, and that's why one of the things I think sorry to move away from MGS4 for a second, but that's one of the things I think is such a turnaround for the franchise is 5. The team went from a game that was story and set piece first. For example, you take Act 2 when you're running through Peru or South America, and you're on top of the I forgot the name of that unit and you have it's kind of like a rail shooter where you're shooting the gecko, right? And like other kind of the zombie PMCs, right? You have set pieces like that, which is a lot of what MGS4 is. And then you could turn around and you have a very hardcore, deep systems driven game like MGS5. And it's such an incredible turnaround. And I think to bring it back to 4 is that I think Hideo is very aware of the shortcomings of the previous title, and sometimes he maybe overcorrects when he goes and makes the sequel. And so I think the people love the cinematics of MGS1. So okay, here's a ton more beautiful cinematics MGS2. Oh wait, too much story, not enough gameplay. Okay, 3's got a nice balance. But people love the cinematics and the story of 3. So here's more in 4, right? Oh, you guys don't like all the gameplay, the lack of gameplay in 4? Okay, we're going to go way overboard, and it's a very systems driven, where the story takes a huge backseat in 5, in my opinion. And you got a very systems driven game. So yeah, it's fascinating to look at it from that perspective. So if you zoom out of the whole franchise and say, look, I don't like the one game that has the most cinematics, the least amount of gameplay, and those systems aren't very deep, I think that's a completely fair criticism of 4.
You see, now you got me wondering if I'm being too hard on it.
No, it's if it's not the one you like, the pie chart of gameplay versus cinematics is not very good, right?
That wasn't
it's very hardcore it's very heavy on cinematics, right?
Yeah, but the amount of cinematics are something that I never really had an issue with. It was how about this? It's the more I think about it, and the more I've heard you explain it, it does seem like creating a game like MGS4, especially with as many expectations as there were, is sort of a Sisyphean task. I mean, the amount of hype around that game at the time was just unbelievable. It was almost in a lot of ways a repeat of what happened with Metal Gear Solid 2, where they have this new platform and there is this game that unquestionably blows everything else out of the water that's being shown at the time, to the point that PC developers were looking at this and going, how the hell did he do that? Right? And MGS4 was sort of a repeat of that in a lot of ways. You had this, the PlayStation 3, which at the time was, kind of being touted as the world's the most powerful game system ever made. You can do anything with it. It'll do your homework. And then you've got that first trailer, which just looks phenomenal. I mean, the expectations you guys must have been under, the pressure, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was absurd. It was exciting, and that trailer that you're talking about, Ryan, that first real trailer, the one where you meet the Otacon or the MK2.
Yeah, it's very like Black Hawk Down-ish.
Very Black Hawk Down. In fact, there was people in the studio had Black Hawk Down on DVD on repeat just to kind of study the tone that Ridley Scott went for. And it was really cool. It was very intentional, and then a lot of other like Lord of War was another film that we looked at a lot.
Oh, that's such a good one.
I love that film.
Yeah, it is. And Guns of Navarone, obviously, but the expectations were really high. So with that first trailer, it wasn't pure PS5 or PS3 where we understood every single thing about that hardware. We were making a lot of guesses because the gameplay wasn't really to the point of showing at that point. It was very far off. So the team was making a lot of assumptions about what they were going to be able to pull off for the final game. And I remember seeing comparison videos of like what the final game looked like versus what that first trailer looked like. And to be fair, the game never hit the heights that first trailer did, but it got pretty darn close. And that was the effort. That was the result of years of the team working so hard to try to hit that bar that really high bar that they set. And it's an incredible accomplishment. And yeah, the amount of stress and expectations was really high. But I mean, that's why I wanted to be there, and I think that's why a lot of people wanted to be there. Like, sure, you could go to a different floor in Konami, and again, I don't mean to disparage any other teams over there, but oftentimes it was lights out at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And you didn't have to come in on weekends, right? But then in exchange, the games that you're working on weren't necessarily the games that people are dying for interviews for. They're on the front cover of these magazines that people are lining up outside of Best Buy at midnight to go buy, right? And so that was why we would sometimes get people from other Konami teams, and they would say, "Hey, I want to join Kojima Productions. I want to be here because I want that. I'm okay with hard work, and I want to do something great." And I loved working with guys like that because I shared a lot of the same values that they did.
And yeah, you guys were pretty much the dream team at the time.
We were,
yeah. It's crazy thinking back at just how much you guys were accomplishing, and I feel bad for all of the crap we gave you back in the day. I really do. You didn't deserve it.
Oh well, don't. I don't even know. I only got one really nasty tweet over the last 10 years since like MGS4 shipped, I guess, in 2008.
And it was from me.
I don't have a. It wasn't from you.
Kidding,
it wasn't. It was from some guy that was very upset with me over the story for MGS4. I just had to remind him in the nicest way possible. I didn't write the story for MGS4 there, buddy. I'm really sorry of how much I offended you. So yeah, there's no need to apologize, and I'm really proud of the game. Like I said, Metal Gear Solid 3 is my favorite. So 4 is not my favorite Metal Gear game, but I think it's an accomplishment in so many ways. And I desperately want that game to come back in some form. And I think it's going to be. I think for the most part, I think it's going to be celebrated, despite its like very obvious flaws.
I would love to see it come back. Despite everything I've said, I would love to see a re-release of that game. Just even. I would love to play that game again on modern hardware, in a remaster.
Right.
I think that would be crazy to experience. But even just from a game preservation standpoint, which is something I care a lot about, I want to see these things stand the test of time. And right now, with everything going digital, it's just getting harder and harder to do that. It's anytime a game gets a physical release, that's immediately where I go to. I try to avoid digital purchases are so convenient, and I'll still pick them up at from time to time, but if a game's got a physical release, I'm usually going to go for that just so I've got it, and I never have to worry about it going anywhere unless 50 years from now disc rot sets in or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. We got that other problem, but yeah, good for you. And I try to do the same as well because I'm always anticipating Skynet, taking over and then going down. And then we never have access to all these works that are just purely digital. So, the irony though of it all, like oftentimes you have to put these discs in now to get updates and get the real version of the game, but that's a whole other subject. But yeah, like you, I'm a big game preservation person. I really want Metal Gear Solid 4 to be on modern platforms with like a proper physical release. And heck, I want to see portable ops and Acid 1 and 2 on some sort of like Metal Gear Solid portable collection. that's released on modern consoles as well. I think there's a lot of things to celebrate from those titles as well.
I gotta tell you, man, I think so many people are sleeping on Metal Gear Acid. Those games are so much fun, especially that second one. My God, it kills me that more people don't appreciate those.
I was going to say the same thing, but about Portable Ops.
Thank you.
Like, I think people strongly sleep on Portable Ops. I think it's a really good game. And what you were saying about Metal Gear Solid 3 being your favorite in the series, I think it's the pinnacle of arcade stealth gameplay. And 1 to 2 expanded on 1 in a big way. I think 3 expanded on 2 in a big way in terms of just gameplay and arcade stealth.
Yep.
The progression of that was Portable Ops, and it went to obviously a portable console. I feel like a re-release of Portable Ops with an updated control style could be a serious hit. It's such a good game.
It is absolutely
you.
insane that you guys were able to fit what you did into a PSP with Portable Ops.
Not only that, but to do that in 14 months from start to finish.
Wow.
Oof.
Jeez.
I still can't believe it when I say that we did that in 14 months. And by we, I mean like mostly the team that I was working with. Although, as I think you guys know my history, that was the game I got really involved with, way more than Lunar Nights. It was Portable Ops, which really put me on the map, and I got much more involved in real game development. And then, and subsequently with 4, and then then the rest is history. But yeah, like Portable Ops, that team, 14 months from start to finish. Granted, they were building off the Metal Gear Solid 3's Subsistence engine, which was ported to PSP. So they had a baseline and they had assets that they could borrow from it. But it's just amazing what they were able to do.
Yeah, it's one of those crazy, hey, we've got to fit this enormous thing into small space sort of things. Not in terms of compression necessarily, but just it's just unbelievably impressive that you can play a game like that on the PSP. It kind of reminds me of how that one development team fit all of Resident Evil 2 onto a Nintendo 64 cartridge.
Yeah, it was like it's Angel Fire or something. I think they ended up becoming Rockstar whatever, San Diego or whatever. But
that sort of work.
Yeah, it's a similar type of thing. Yeah, where it's like a lot of technical trickery going on, but just the content. Now, granted, the game was built very smart. It had the Metal Gear Solid 3 engine, which they're using, so they're not starting from scratch with the engine. Granted, they had to build the game to work with the lack of like a dual analog sticks, which, by the way, the first Metal Gear Solid 3 did ship without necessarily like a full 3D camera and everything like that. You
don't need it sucks.
Right. And then very smart to call up Ashley Wood and then a production company in Japan called Spooky, which created those animatics, right? Which then made it so the team didn't have to work on the cinematics. They didn't have to worry about the cinematics. They're just working on the moment-to-moment gameplay. But even still, with like all the boss bouts and everything, it's really impressive what the team was built not only in a single player game, but they built a multiplayer component too, which people don't really talk about. But it had PvP, which is incredible.
I mean, yeah, that's Portable Ops is the true MGO2. I used to play the hell out of that.
Oh shit, you're gonna piss some people off with that comment. Not gonna lie. Sorry, continue.
All I'm saying is move the number down 1. That's all.
No, it was the second release of a Metal Gear Online. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's just the choice to use drawn animatics like that instead of pre-rendered cutscenes. It doesn't feel out of place. It adds to that experience. That stylized look feels like you're getting something really unique. So the normal 3D cutscenes aren't missed at all.
Yeah, and Yoji Shinkawa was a huge fan of Ashley Wood, so it was really fun to work with those guys, because mainly Yoji was just there, just like looking at the art. He didn't have much feedback. He was just like always just like so into it and so excited every single time Ashley would deliver his next round of cells. And yeah, such a fun project. And that team was really young, really tenacious, super hardworking team. And then they eventually, and I think for good reason, got absorbed in the Metal Gear Solid 4 team once they shipped Portable Ops. So that was the end for the most part, there was Portal Ops Plus, but that was basically the end of the PSP development until obviously, I mean, the whole team like went from Metal Gear Solid 4 and PlayStation 3 to all of a sudden going back to PSP, which is in and of itself a very interesting move for the company with Peace Walker. But that was around the time that I was leaving.
Do you have any thoughts?
So that, yeah, you were... Go ahead, sorry.
Do you have any thoughts on why Metal Gear has a monopoly on this style of gameplay and no other company, not only has no one ever successfully ripped it off, but no one's really tried?
In terms of like the moment-to-moment gameplay of Metal Gear?
Yeah, so like, so I'd say Solid 1 to 3, Portable Ops included. No one can make a game that even looks like that or plays like that.
So there have been attempts, and I think it's funny because like I think Hideo at some point in time would kind of like wink and nod at them, like for example Siphon Filter and then Splinter Cell in particular. I have a different perspective, if that's okay, which is that I feel like obviously Metal Gear is very unique and for a variety of different reasons, but I remember playing and being really upset when I played Arkham Asylum back in 2009 because I thought that they took a lot of the elements of Metal Gear Solid 4, not in a bad way. Like I wasn't upset because I think they might have borrowed some elements, but I was upset at myself for like how elegantly they were able to take some pretty complex movements and simplify them in that game. And so when I'm going across like a cable and I'm stealthing around, I'm going to cover, I'm going out and enough cover, I'm sneaking up behind a guy. It was all very fluid and very easy to do. And I felt like it was in some ways, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but an homage or inspired by Metal Gear Solid.
I had the same thought the first time I played it. I felt like it was, especially the combat was just incredibly fluid and just easy to get to grips with. But I think the biggest difference is it was very simple in that game. And although it felt fluid, it was super simple when you compare it to Metal Gear.
Yeah, you're right. I think the complexities of the Metal Gear Solid games, especially 4, when you look at, and I think that's one of the disappointing things about the game is that the team put so many features into that game in terms of the grenades and all the weapons you could buy from Drebin and all the different systems all at play, but you don't have a really big sandbox to mess around with them. Again, that's I think what MGS5 is in a lot of ways. But with 4, I think it was just a bummer. I just wanted more. I wanted more opportunities to really flex the game's muscles, if you will.
Well, was there ever any sort of idea to create a sort of like a double dip of MGS4, substance, subsistence, that sort of thing? Or was MGO2 sort of meant to fill that gap?
There were ideas being thrown around during Metal Gear Solid 4, which I guess is the first time I've ever talked about this publicly, but we knew that we had to cut a few things, but not that much. Not a lot was cut from that game. But I remember hearing, this could maybe go into a subsistence, and I was kind of throwing some ideas around as well. And some of them were in talks about whether or not this game would eventually go to PC. That would go to PC or go to Xbox 360, and what would be special about that mode. But I think for reasons actually that I don't know, that all those ideas and those ended up not becoming reality because the team shifted so hard to Peace Walker, in addition to building the Fox engine and simultaneously. So those were, I think they kind of had their hands full. Also, I guess I want to also bring up that related to Fox engine, the team was kind of just done with the engine that they built for MGS4, and then they built off of MGS3's engine for it. I think they had convinced themselves that this engine was not going to take them into the future, and so it was time to say goodbye and build Fox engine.
That's kind of ironic.
I know there have been data miners who have looked at MGS4 and have looked at pieces of the Fox engine and have seen little remnants of MGS4 that sort of hung around. But yeah, Fox engine from just like you said, was sort of entirely detached for the most part from the previous games, whereas before it seemed like they built each engine on top of the previous all the way up through MGS4.
Yeah, definitely they would strip down a lot of things that they didn't like and then rebuild them. But yeah, the baseline, I believe, was the same. And what's pretty amazing when you look at what the team did on PlayStation 3 with MGS4 and then MGS5. And you can just see how powerful the Fox engine is in terms of its streaming.
Yeah.
The load times, obviously, like it was just constructed for more of like a modern console. It's all of its multi-platform, capabilities as well, and so many other things we could talk about. But it's just incredible what that team was able to do.
I looked at your credits, Ryan, and I did see that you worked on Brawl. Were you part of sort of that, I guess, transitionary team to get Snake onto Super Smash Brothers, or can you elaborate on your role with that credit?
Oh yeah, I don't even deserve a credit for that. But I'll tell you just the little that I can, because I didn't have much involvement in having Snake make his way into Smash Brothers. But I remember hearing from a fellow producer that I worked with on Metal Gear about this super secret thing that was going on, and he like told me in a whispered voice that Snake was going to be coming to Smash Brothers, and I thought, yeah, well, that's cool. I thought like he was going to tell me that I don't know, Sony was going to buy Konami, or I don't know.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Somebody's going to take that the wrong way. Sorry,
There's been like 8 rumors about that in the past year.
Oh really? I like legitimately just threw that out there as just like some kind of crazy big rumor or some big event that could happen. Oh, yeah, we're doing a Metal Gear movie or something like that. Maybe that would have been another kind of big shocking thing. But no, it was Snake is being Smash Bros. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And he's like, no, you can't. This is super, super secret. Nintendo's very careful about this stuff. I'm like, I know, and I get it. And like, I knew Sakurai-san. So I didn't want to upset him too. So I kept the secret, and then I worked very closely in secret with NOA to do the voiceover sessions. I think, if I remember correctly, I wasn't even allowed in the room when they recorded the actual lines. I knew the lines that they were going to be recording with David, but I don't think I had permission, because that's how secret it was, even though I had to review the lines. But I wasn't there to hear. So, yeah.
You're reviewing like the lines, like for instance, like the dialogue he says about on the codec for each character, or?
Correct. So I remember reviewing those and giving feedback, or just helping coordinate that stuff. But we were recording MGS4 that for many, many, many weeks, myself and Chris and Bryn Salter in LA, but then the Nintendo guys they flew down, and then that was my cue to exit the studio for half an hour to let David record his Smash Brothers lines, and then I came back, and then they told me about some of the funny performances that David did, and I pretend not to hear that because I guess that was probably a violation, and then and that was it. So I got a credit for that. It was by far the most secretive thing I think I've ever worked on.
That's really strange.
At my time on Konami, it was because Nintendo is just so hardcore about confidentiality.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get it today with Ultimate, because the secrecy around that, and there's so much hype that's generated around every single character announcement. So, but back during Brawl, wow.
Hearing that wasn't even slightly surprising to me in any way. I
really?
wouldn't have had any doubts it was like that.
Yeah, no, it was something I just never experienced before, and it's definitely stood out as a very distinct memory from my time there.
Is it sort of a thing that you mentioned before, like at Konami you had like the secret key cards and all of this stuff? Is there anything like that you sort of brought with you to Camouflaj, or are you more open about it? Or, I mean, like, this is, since you get to run the show, you get to kind of decide what the culture is like to some degree.
I had actually a quite long conversation with a new hire at Camouflaj about this yesterday, in which I was explaining, because he was asking me similar kind of questions, and I said, I've designed Camouflaj to be very different than what I experienced at Konami and at Microsoft, and not because I had bad experiences there. It's because I have a different approach to leadership and team dynamics. And the example I was giving him yesterday, I'll share with you all, is that in some ways the way that Kojima Productions ran was highly efficient, because it was, if you needed an answer, you typically would get it, and it would come from Hideo, and it was fairly definitive, and there wasn't a lot of room for debate. It depends on who you are. And to be fair, like, I was one of those guys that would debate it at times, right? And to his credit, he would listen, and sometimes he would change his opinion, or we would come up with a compromise, right? But for the most part, if it was like, this is what we're doing, very few people questioned it, and we could move very quickly. And that was, again, one of the advantages.
Was there ever one of those, like, sorry, I'm so sorry for keep interrupting.
No, please.
Was there, like, I always see this meme that's like, and I regret not asking this to other people, but there's always this meme that's like, and then Kojima said to do X, Y, and Z, and at first I thought he was joking, but then he was like, get to it. Like, did you ever actually have those moments? Because I feel like it's partially a joke, but I've seen it like once on a behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, that stuff would happen oftentimes because we were not even, because he will joke around quite a bit too. So we really weren't sure, like, because you want to be careful, because sometimes if he says like, hey, we're going to do something, and then it doesn't happen, he's like, wait, why aren't we doing this? Like, where you haven't made progress on this. Some people will say, oh, I thought you were joking, right? So, so there's definitely elements like that. I can give you a specific example. With the opening movie of Metal Gear Solid 4, he threw out like 3 or 4 different ideas about what that whole thing could be via that collaboration with Logan. And some of the ideas on there, I think one of them was that it could be claymation.
Oh, that would have been sick.
And that would have been pretty cool.
I think I remember thinking and like wondering, is he joking or is this real? But we were already heading in a different direction, so I didn't actually have to ask him if that was like a real suggestion or not. But I think sometimes he would just kind of throw out ideas and then see which one stuck. Oftentimes, but it was pretty clear the direction that he wanted to go with, because we had a really good meeting in LA with Alexei Televich, who runs Logan, and we got really excited about the future TV idea. So the claymation thing, I don't even think came up in conversation, but I remember thinking I might need to bring it up if we weren't going to get behind this TV idea. But I digress. But yeah, to go back to what I was talking about when it comes to Camouflaj, though, is that if you have that top-down approach, it's great. It can be really efficient, but it doesn't necessarily empower a lot of the people around the team, and you're not always asked and forced to like think critically about certain things. It's just you're kind of being the critical thought is happening outside your purview, and you're just kind of being told what to do. And I remember when I went to Microsoft, I remember being discouraged, frustrated, and mainly those two emotions when I would suggest something and I would get a lot of pushback. And I was wondering, is this a Microsoft thing? But I realized over time that it's more of a cultural thing. It's just that I think at least in the States, there's much more open collaboration and opportunities for dissent, right? And a lot of good reasons, right? So I had to like justify a lot of the things that I was proposing. And so what we have at Camouflaj now is I'm trying to empower the team to act like directors. So I'm asking them more than I have in the past to come up with ideas, to come up with a vision. What's your vision statement? What are your pillars for your feature? And push these things forward and can try to convince your team members and get by and rally them behind these things. But you don't have the ability to just tell people what to do. They should challenge you. And when you're challenged, I hope you try to find compromises and win-wins and work with them to kind of overcome these things. And that applies to me too. So one thing that I do that I don't think we would have done at Konami was that, for example, just the other day, I had a meeting in which I was trying to find a path forward for a gadget that we're working on in our game. And I wanted it to work one way, and another team member wanted it to work another way. And we were at an impasse. And so this was the 4th meeting we had in which we're talking about, here's the reasons why I like my version and why I don't like this other approach. And it was very open. And we came up with a really brilliant compromise, and I'm super happy. And I think it's actually better than what I was coming up with originally. And that's one of the reasons why you go about the designing a studio the way I'm trying to design Camouflaj now, is that I believe that independently I can come up with a lot of great ideas. But I believe that like the best work ultimately comes from interdependence, right? That where the team members can challenge me and I don't overrule them. And but it can be harder. It can be harder in your blood pressure. It can take longer to create things. And you do lack a little bit of like the kind of the authorship, kind of the auteur element that you see in games where there's a lot of top down, like you get in BioShock or you get in Metal Gear games and so forth. But it's just the style of leadership that I think I've come into really being really excited about, and we've still got a long way to go. But yeah, it's a lot. That's just inspired by what I what I experienced at Kojima Productions and at Microsoft, and this is what I'm doing with Camouflaj now.
So you get to make it a lot more collaborative. Do you ever think someday you might want to go that auteur route and have your passion project, or is that something you've already done with Republic? Or
so I thought about it because we had a problem with over the last few years, which I've been trying to address, which is what oftentimes people like me will do is that if they come from a more hierarchical structure, when they start a studio, they look at the Valve handbook, which is not really accurate, by the way, and they'll say, we're going flat, right? It's just super collaborative, right? And it's exciting for a smaller team. It can work for a little while, but what ends up happening invariably is that just like in a lot of like flat societies, right, you get this kind of shadow hierarchy emerging.
Yeah.
And we had the same problem. And so what I'm trying to do is trying to evolve our structure to be such that it's not everybody's like completely equal, but that we have bespoke leaders of many areas of the game, and trying to empower them. So it's not just like this completely egalitarian system. Yes, some people's voices are louder and more important than others. The experts of this feature, the director of this feature, does have more authority, but ultimately can't just overrule people because of like their job title. So that's kind of like an evolution of it, of what we're attempting. Still, it kind of remains to be seen whether or not it's successful or not. But we're moving away from like a kind of a more of a traditional flat structure at the moment.
Well, Valve is kind of a unique case study anyway for that, because they never. I mean, this is a company that's got Steam feeding them endless amounts of passive income, so they really only need to develop projects when they want to anyway.
And when they do it really well, and that's what I find really frustrating. Is that I always say the same thing. I'm like, hey, we're not Valve. We don't have this instant stream of money, and where they can just work on their games for as long as they want to. But it's hard to argue like that they figured it out. Now, I don't think it's completely flat over there, even though that's what people kind of interpreted from their handbook from many years ago. There are people with louder voices, and I won't get into the details of it. But I love to learn about how they build their games. So there is a structure over there. Whether or not they talk about it publicly or not is a separate thing. But when they do make their games, they're incredible. Dota 2 is an incredible game, and they built it with a fraction of the team size that League of Legends and Riot did, which is I still find incredible. And then with like Half-Life Alyx most recently, what an incredible game, and with a relatively small team. Those guys just continuing to impress. They also have, like as you mentioned, though, the Steam revenue, which allows them to hire some of the best people in the entire industry. So they have just a wild collection of absolute top of their game rock stars working there.
This is just an interesting conversation to have in a day where, the type of management and workload that developing teams have is such a controversial, not controversial. Well, yeah, controversial topic. It shouldn't be controversial. That's what I'm trying to say.
Days and I both work in software development, so although we don't really have a like a first-hand experience of what it's like to be in a busy game development studio, we have a little bit of a glimpse at what that culture is like. So
what culture do you mean?
Of just how breakneck it can be at times, and how you have to find a good balance between following orders and collaboration.
Oh, I see.
With something with such high deliverables, I guess. I can't believe I'm using that word outside of the clock. With something so that needs to be so refined, I guess I feel like it would be such a challenge to figure out what would be the best form of hierarchy and management, in the days of like finding out these companies have these massive crunches for these AAA games.
And also, it's not just making a piece, like a product or a piece of software, but depending on your perspective and the style of your studio, you're also trying to make art as well. So there's that tug of war between business and art, I'd imagine, that's a constant source of frustration.
Yeah, it's a constant source of tension, absolutely, and I can link it back to Metal Gear 2, by the way, which is that we're making software, but it's also a creative endeavor. And one thing that we're trying to do on our team is to do a better job of embracing iteration and setting ourselves up for success when it comes to that, and not being upset when we trash things and when we cut things and we start from scratch or we iterate on things, which is something that's like it could be really tough for teams. But I find one of the things I love to do in my off hours, if you will, is to talk to other game developers and learn from them. Like kind of like how you are asking me questions, I'm asking them questions. Like, tell me about the final hours of working on this game, or why, like, how did you create this sequence, or why is your team so much faster at this stuff than we are? And I love learning. And one of the things that I just want to be better about, and I think we're being better about this on our current title, is having that really bold iteration that allows for us to put in a scene, say like, yeah, it's working well here, but not really well there, and then redoing the scene, re-mocap it, we bring in the actors again. It's a way of doing work that we haven't done before, but it's different than the Metal Gear style of things, which is very alluring to some of my team members who will tell me, can you just give me the document for what we need to build and we'll just go build it? And that was, I think, MGS4 in a nutshell. It wasn't a lot of iteration. It was, here's this set piece, here's how it's going to function, and we put the pieces in there. And because Hideo and the rest of the team had built 3 other Metal Gear games, they were pretty confident that the mechanics were just going to work.
Yeah.
And the set pieces were going to work. And for the most part, they were right, because they could really make some really educated guesses, right? With MGS5, for example, though, I think that was a lot more different. I could tell it was a lot more iteration heavy. It was a much longer development too, right? And I would assume that they had a lot more struggles. But ultimately, what I think it did is it yielded a better video game. And I think it yielded their most solid gameplay-driven game. And in a lot of ways, they embodied what makes Nintendo games so good, in which they're constantly focused on the moment-to-moment gameplay, and they're constantly iterating on it above everything else. And I think that's an area of development that I want to be better about moving forward as well.
I will say, I know we're kind of going a little long here. I'm sorry to take up so much of your time.
Yeah, we probably should wrap up pretty soon.
But I will say, just on one last note, that regarding Metal Gear Solid 4, and thank you again for being so patient with me despite my attitude.
No,
towards
you
it
don't
over
need
the
to
years.
apologize.
It is a game that there are so many individual things in that game that are so impressive to me and that I think are so creative, and I wish there had been more emphasis on them, or they would have had more time to be developed out or were explored more. That may be the single biggest source of frustration for me, because of how many unique elements there were, and I never got to see enough of any one of them.
Yeah, you and me both, and I think it ultimately comes back to that iteration. I'll leave you with this interesting tidbit about the game, which I think I've shared a little bit publicly, but not too much. Which is, I remember, so the game, as you know, shipped on June 12th, 2008, and I remember going home for the Christmas and New Year's break at the end of 2007, and when I came back, it was early January. We are 4 months from Gold Master. We're going Gold Master at the end of April. I can't play the game from start to finish because it's just not there. And the enemies that are placed there, oftentimes they're not even patrolling. And I can't fight a lot of the bosses because they're just not plugged in correctly. And I was just thinking, we're never going to ship this game on time. And granted, it was after a delay too, right? But we're never going to ship it on June 12th. And the team, it's a testament to the team's hard work and their talents. And also, it goes back to that thing I was talking about, which is so much of the game was planned up front, and then it was like kind of slotting it in. And then it really wasn't until like February, March, April, 3 months of just playing it. Now, fully, all the parts are in there. Now just play it. And make what we have good and great in a matter of 3 months. And they're not unique in that. There was other game developers doing this, like Japanese game developers, and I would suspect they probably did this on MGS3 as well. But it didn't leave for that kind of time that I think you're looking for, Ryan, where it's just like, wow, this part is really cool. Like, why don't we extend it? No, there's no extending this. We don't even know what it would be. It was just like all the parts. Put it a different way. It sounds like how Boeing makes their airplanes, which is you've got a lot of engineers, a lot of blueprints, and then they order literally thousands of parts from all over the world from all these different companies. and then they have to piece it all together. And then there's like time for testing and things like that, obviously. But that is very much how MGS4 was built, and it doesn't leave a lot of opportunity to lean into the stuff that's working really good, and then to cut or like curb back on the stuff that's not really looking good. We had literally days to make those decisions, not weeks or months.
What I'm learning tonight is that I've got a lot more I need to learn. So
That's
Ryan,
a good thing, though, right?
No. What you're
yeah.
what you're learning is that MGS4 is not that bad, and you're excited for hopefully eventual re-release, which I don't have any knowledge of, obviously, but I'm with you. I hope that it comes out at some point again, is celebrated. But here's the other thing. I really genuinely mean this. It's okay to not like that game. Like, even you could be a fan of Metal Gear and not like those games, or not like certain games or certain parts of the games. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I like Star Wars. I grew up loving Star Wars. I don't like any Star Wars film outside of maybe Rogue One since Return of the Jedi. And I think that's okay, right?
Yeah, that's what we've kind of always compared Metal Gear Solid 4 to, is it's like it's the prequels. It's like where it gives you all the information about how the Force works and what a Jedi is and stuff, and just kind of kills all the magic and the mystique.
Ouch, that cuts deep for me, but I'll accept it. I'll take it.
Damn.
I wish you could you at least say it's like Rogue One.
Wow.
Can you at least say it's like Rogue One?
Ryan, it's like Rogue One.
Maybe not. Oh, thank you. Okay, whew. Okay, we can end on a positive note.
Ryan, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us. I know you're a very busy man, and it's been really awesome to sort of reconnect with you and have a conversation that I'm not completely embarrassed during. So,
it's been fun. Thank you for having me on the show. More than happy to come back at any point in time, and thank you guys for just for your passion for the franchise, for what Hideo does with the team behind these games, what they do. It's incredible, and what they continue to do is incredible. I'm just so thankful that there's people out there that care to the degree that you want to create a podcast series over. So thank you.
Thank you for all your work, man. We definitely all appreciate all the stuff that you've done for it. So
thank you.
Before you go, did you want to? I know you've got a lot of projects going on, of course. Everything with Camouflaj. Where can people find you if they want to learn more, find out more about the games you're working on? Anything you want to plug as coming up soon?
Oh, thank you. Now we're in kind of quiet mode right now, just focusing on our next game. But we do have Republic coming out on Switch, PlayStation 4 again, and PlayStation VR sometime in early next year. We don't have we're zeroing on a release date pretty soon, so we're excited for those games to come out on those platforms. But besides that, we're just heads down on our current game, and so I'm wishing you and your audience like happy holidays and stay safe in this crazy time of the world history that we're going through, and looking forward to when we can talk again.
Oh yeah. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You betcha. Thank you.